Will the LA Kings head into the playoffs on a positive note? That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. The LA Kings play their final game of the regular season at home tonight against the Chicago Blackhawks before heading into the Stanley Cup playoffs. There is playoff positioning on the line tonight. We'll give you all the details on what that exactly is coming up a bit. Check that matchup possibilities for the Kings. It's down to two teams. And again, we'll give you the details on that coming up. But let's check the tail of the tape, to use an old boxing term. How do the Kings and Blackhawks match up statistically? This is the third and final meeting between the Kings and Blackhawks. And not too long ago, Kings Blackhawks was a pretty big deal. Not so much anymore, as Chicago's fallen on hard times. But LA won the first matchup between these two teams on March the 15th in Chicago. That was a 5-0 shutout. We had Cam Talbot with the 28 save performance to get the shutout. Anze Kopitar had 2 goals. P.L. Dubois, Alex Laferriere, and Jordan Spence had goals as well. Just 4 days later, the two teams would match up again, this time in Los Angeles, with the Kings posting a 6-2 win. Once again, Anze Kopitar had a 2-goal game. Alex Laferriere, Philip Deneau, Trevor Lewis, and Vladislav Gavrikov adding the goals. Cam Talbot was once again in net. He allowed 2 goals on 28 shots in the win. Now, coming into tonight's game, the Kings have a record of 43, 27, and 11. That's 4th best in the Pacific Division, 8th best in the Western Conference, and 14th in the NHL with 97 points. Kings are 21, 12, and 7 at home this year, 11, 3, and 1 at home since the All-Star break, and coming off a 3-1 home loss in an uninspired effort against the Minnesota Wild on Monday. As for the Chicago Blackhawks, talked about them falling on hard times, one of the worst teams in the NHL. They are 23, 53, and 5 coming into this game. 8th place, last place in the Central Division, 15th place in the Western Conference, and 31st in the NHL with 51 points. Only the San Jose Sharks have fewer points than the Blackhawks. Chicago, worst road team in the league, fewest wins and most losses, 32 and 1 away from the Windy City this year. Blackhawks lost their last game. That was against the Vegas Golden Knights in Las Vegas, 3-1 this past Tuesday. Kings have dropped to 18th in the NHL in goals scored per game at 3.07. Chicago is dead last in goals scored per game with an average of 2.15. LA is 3rd in the NHL in goals allowed per game, 2.54. Chicago 29th in the league in allowing goals per game at 3.51. Kings are 14th in the league on the power play, 22.1%. Blackhawks are 29th with the man advantage, 16.2%. LA is still 2nd in the NHL to the Carolina Hurricanes on the penalty kill, 84.9%. Chicago 27th on the PK at 76.2%. Individually, the Kings have 3 players with 70 or more points, 1 player with 30 goals, and 3 players with 20 or more goals. Adrian Kempe and Kevin Fiala are tied for the team lead in points with 73 each, so we'll have the Kings scoring champion possibly decided tonight. Anze Kopitar has 70 points in the season. Trevor Moore leads the Kings with 13 goals. Kevin Fiala has 29, Adrian Kempe 27, Anze Kopitar 26. The Chicago Blackhawks have 1 player with 60 or more points, 2 players with 20 or more goals. They are led by Rookie of the Year frontrunner Connor Bedard, this past season's number 1 overall pick. He has 61 points and 22 goals. Jason Dickinson, the only other player on the Blackhawks that has more than 20 goals, he also has 22. As for the 2 netminders, the Kings are expected to go with number 1 goalie Cam Talbot, checks in with a record of 26, 19, and 6, 2.47 goals against average, and a 915 save percentage with 3 shutouts. In his last start, he did allow 3 goals on 28 shots in a loss to the Wild. He's 2-0 against Chicago this season, allowing a total of 2 goals on 52 shots. And I mentioned this earlier in the week. I thought that Talbot would play the final game of the regular season. I didn't think that he or the Kings would want him to have a full week off before or in between starts, with the Kings likely beginning their playoff season on this coming Monday. So it is expected to be Cam Talbot tonight. Blackhawks also expected to go with their number one goalie, Peter Mrazek. He checks in with a record of 18, 31, and 4, 3.05 goals against average, and a 908 save percentage with 1 shutout. He's 0-1 in 2 appearances against the Kings this season. He's allowed 7 goals on 47 shots. In his last game, that was 2 goals allowed on 36 shots in the loss to Vegas. As for the Kings' projected starting lineup tonight, this is unofficial, but the Kings are expected to make a couple of changes. We talked with Kings analyst Daryl Evans on yesterday's show. If you missed that, please go back and check it out. But Quinton Byfield has been moved down in the lineup to the 4th line. And I asked Daryl Evans if he was concerned about the slump that Quinton Byfield finds himself in. I believe it was 19 games without a goal and 9 games without a point, something like that. And he said he wasn't concerned. He thought maybe that Q was kind of pressing and maybe taking him off the top line would relieve some of that pressure. I don't buy that. I am not saying that Daryl Evans doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm just saying, how does a guy gain confidence by having his minutes reduced and playing on the 4th line? So I don't agree with this move. Maybe this is something in the final game of the regular season to kind of send a message. Don't know. But Quinton Byfield was in practice on Wednesday on the 4th line with P.L. Dubois and Alex Turcotte, who is now back from injury. So the different looking 4th line for the Kings, I guess you could say. Alex Laferriere apparently will be on the top line with Andrei Kopitar and Adrian Kempe. Of course, that's subject to change because Jim Hiller doesn't mind mixing things up. But Quinton Byfield apparently down from the top line to the 4th line in this game against Chicago. Other than that, everything pretty much the same for the Kings offensively and defensively. So if you listen to the Kings, I guess this game ultimately doesn't mean anything. Whoever the Kings play in the playoffs is going to be a challenge according to the head coach and some players. And that's true. But in my opinion, one of those teams is an even bigger challenge than the other. The Dallas Stars are being picked by a lot of people to win it all this season. They have owned the Kings this season, 3-0, and they outscored LA 13-3. We actually beat Edmonton this season. We shut them out. And one of the losses was in a shootout. And if you look at the goals against goals for against the Oilers, the Kings have scored 9 goals. Edmonton scored 11. So it's been pretty even. Unfortunately, the Kings are going to need help now if they are going to, in fact, end up facing the Edmonton Oilers because of their loss to the Minnesota Wild. We're going to get into detail on that coming up in just a bit. I think Kings fans' optimism on winning against either Dallas or Edmonton is not going to be real high. But imagine how we're all going to feel going into the postseason having lost to one of the worst teams in the NHL. So the Kings need to take care of business tonight. End the regular season on a high note. Do it the right way. Feel a little bit better about yourselves going into the playoffs. Give the fans one more reason to cheer and finish with 99 points on the season and maybe earn a little bit of a more favorable matchup against the Edmonton Oilers. As for the keys to victory tonight for the Kings, and this is going to be my keys going into the first game of the playoffs, regardless of who the Kings face. So I figure, why not get a head start on it? The number one key for me to the Kings is play with attitude. They didn't have that against Minnesota or the win over Anaheim. Come out with passion, with fire, be physical, fly around the ice, and just play with some attitude. I'm not saying the Kings didn't play hard in those 2 games, but they didn't play with a lot of fire. You got to play with some fire. The second key for me is score the first goal of the game. The Kings are a much better team when they get that first goal, and this kind of goes hand in hand with coming out strong and playing with emotion and fire and being physical. You do that most of the time, it's going to lead to you scoring the first goal of the game. And my third key is win the special teams battle. Again, I think this is a key for the Kings going forward. If they're going to be competitive, if they're going to win a first-round playoff series against a team that on paper is better than them, they have to win the special teams battle. They've been great on the penalty kill all year, but the power play has to be at least equal to the teams they're playing in the postseason as well. So again, tonight, get that started on the right note. Get a power play goal. Don't allow a power play goal and win the special teams battle. All right, we have some Kings Award winners to tell you about, both officially and unofficially. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. I have to admit, I definitely have a competitive side. We all do, and my competitive side enjoys playing Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It is a great twist on Monopoly, where you play, against hundreds of Monopoly boards, again, crazy locations. You can build up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with your friends, having rivalries with your friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon. You can team up with your friends and people around the world in timed tournaments and earn huge rewards. So get in on the game, join your friends, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Okay, this is not a humble brag, but I was sent an email by the LA Kings asking me to vote on the team's annual awards as a member of the local media that covers the team, and I appreciate being given that opportunity. So here were the 4 awards that the media voted on for. The first one was Best Defensive Player. Now, I took this as, by the way, there's no explanation as to how you're supposed to vote on this. It's just Best Defensive Player, and then you fill in the blank space and email it. So I took this as just taking into consideration players' defensive play. Now that might seem obvious, but I voted for Mikey Anderson. If you're talking about a player that just plays defense, that's pretty much all he does. And he does it very well. That's why he's on the top pairing with Drew Doughty. I did consider Drew Doughty as well. Matt Roy, Anze Kopitar certainly were in consideration as well. But in the end, I voted for Mikey Anderson as the Kings' best defensive player. I was outvoted by the local media. They went with Anze Kopitar. No complaints from me on that winner. Then you have the outstanding defenseman. And you might think, well, what's the difference between best defensive player and outstanding defenseman? Well, they're clearly just talking about the defenseman here. So you take the forwards out of it, and it's about the all-around game of a defenseman, not just the defensive side of it. And that's a no-brainer to anyone. It's Drew Doughty. And yes, the rest of my colleagues in the media voted for Drew Doughty as well, as he won that award. The Mark Bavis Memorial Best Newcomer Award. I voted for Alex Laferriere. Now, newcomer doesn't necessarily mean rookie. It just means the best new player on the team this year. I certainly considered Cam Talbot for this, but I was kind of swayed by the fact that I thought Talbot would be pretty good, and I had no expectation that Alex Laferriere would be on the NHL roster this year, much less play almost every game, much less have a pretty solid rookie season. So I went with Alex Laferriere. My fellow members in the media, though, did vote Cam Talbot. And again, I have no complaint with that at all. That's well-deserved. And the final award that the media got to vote on was the Bill Libby Memorial Award for Team MVP. I considered Adrian Kempe, Kevin Fiala, Drew Doughty, and Cam Talbot. But my vote went to Kings captain Anze Kopitar. I've said this all season. When Kopi is going well, the Kings are going well. I don't think there's any more important player for the team than Anze Kopitar. That said, Adrian Kempe won this award, and I have zero problem with that. Juice has upped his game this season, become a better all-around player. He does play solid defense as well. Maybe not quite as big as Kopitar. Of course, he's not expected to as a winger as opposed to a center. But although I voted for Anze Kopitar, I think Adrian Kempe was very well deserving, and I'm glad to see him get recognized as the team MVP. As far as the other awards, these are awards the media did not vote on. There was the Most Inspirational Player, the Ace Bailey Memorial Award. This was voted on by the players, and no surprise, this went to Victor Arvidsson. And considering he was the team's Masterton Trophy nominee as well for dedication and perseverance to hockey, this makes total sense. So Victor Arvidsson, the winner of the Kings' Most Inspirational Player Award. The Unsung Hero Award, this was voted on by the Kings players, went to Kings forward Blake Lizotte. Certainly can understand that. A guy who, usually is on the fourth line, an energy guy, works hard, gives it everything he's got all the time. So Blake Lizotte wins the Unsung Hero Award. The most popular player and the Jim Fox Community Service Award, they're not combined awards, they're separate awards, but they both went to the same person. And that was Kevin Fiala. The most popular player is voted on by the Kings Booster Club. And considering Fiala was just named the King Clancy Memorial finalist, which goes to the NHL player that makes significant humanitarian contributions in his community, it makes sense he would be the winner of the Jim Fox Community Service Award. Kind of like the Masterton with Victor Arvidsson. Every team in the league nominates a player for the King Clancy Award. They whittle it down to 3 finalists, and then they have an award winner at the end of the year. So Kevin Fiala is the Kings representative for the King Clancy Memorial Award, and good for him just to be getting those 2 awards. And finally, we had the Darrell Evans Youth Hockey Service Award, and that one went to Philip Deneau. Apparently, he gets out there in the community and is helping to grow the game here in Southern California. So that's great. So how about a few unofficial awards just for fun? The most improved player. I think this is pretty much a 2-man race between Quentin Byfield and Trevor Moore. And believe it or not, I'm going with the guy from Thousand Oaks. I thought Byfield had this in him, the career numbers he put up this season. And frankly, I think he's got more. I just wasn't sure he'd do it this season. I thought maybe next season, but I'm not surprised to see where Q has come from. He certainly has improved, though, and he certainly would be a great choice for the most improved player. I'm going to go with Trevor Moore, though, because I didn't see this production coming from him as far as the goal scoring. I thought he could be a 20 goal scorer pretty consistently, but 30 goals this year. And frankly, if he hadn't slumped later in the year, he could have gotten maybe to 40 goals. So it's, again, 2-man race. This one's a close call. If you think it's Quentin Byfield, I have no problem with that, but I'm going to go most improved player this year for the Kings. I'm going to go with Trevor Moore. The most underrated player, and I guess this could be like the Unsung Hero Award that Blake Lizotte won, but I'm going to go with Matt Roy on this one. I think he's underrated, I think, to a lot of fans. Quietly goes about his business, very, very solid defensively, and just goes out and does his job game in and game out. It is very rare. Honestly, I can think of one time this year. There were probably a few more, but one time this year where I thought Matt Roy made a mistake on a play. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes, so I think he's pretty underrated. I think Philip Deneau, it would be a pretty good choice as well. The biggest surprise this season to me is Alex Laferriere. Talked about him earlier. Did not think he was going to make the Kings roster. Certainly didn't see him playing almost every game this year and having a very solid rookie year. I think, to me, the biggest surprise is definitely Alex Laferriere, at least the biggest surprise positively. And the biggest disappointment this season, this might seem obvious, but I actually think Arthur Kaliev is very much in the running for this one. And that is probably a little bit personal for me because I had really high expectations for Kaliev this season. I really thought he was going to have a breakout season similar to what we saw from Gabe Vilardi last year. That did not happen for whatever reason. Still, when you talk about biggest disappointments, there's no way you can't say it's PL Dubois. He was being counted on to be and being compensated to be a difference maker this season, and he wasn't. I did also mention we are saying goodbye to another Kings Stanley Cup hero. If you didn't see this, Jeff Carter announced his retirement last night in the final game for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was one of 5 players left in the NHL that played on both of the Kings' 2 Stanley Cup winning teams, along with Andrei Kopitar, Drew Doughty, Trevor Lewis, and of course, Jonathan Quick. Carter played 19 seasons in the NHL, first with the Flyers, then the Blue Jackets before coming to LA, where he spent 10 years, the longest stint of his career with one team, before being traded to Pittsburgh to close out his career. He finishes with 1,321 games played, 442 goals, and 851 points. Not a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. I think he'll get some consideration for it. I'd put him in the Hall of Very Good, and many, many, many players would kill to have a career like he had. The 19 seasons, over 1,000 games played, 2-time Stanley Cup winner, a great career for Jeff Carter, and he certainly was a key to helping the LA Kings win their 2 Stanley Cups. He will be fondly remembered for his time in Los Angeles. Great career. Stick tap to Jeff Carter, who has announced his retirement. The question of who the Kings will face in the first round of the playoffs will be answered tonight. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million coverage. Some option offers same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Life insurance may not be something that you're thinking about, but you should, because you never know what can happen in life. Be responsible and be ready with Policygenius, which helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you when you leave your job. Policygenius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Life insurance, check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonNHL. The LA Kings face the Chicago Blackhawks, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, Thursday night tonight in the regular season finale. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. Well, let's check the Western Conference playoff picture for one final time. The Dallas Stars beat the St. Louis Blues last night, 2-1 in a shootout. They have clinched the number one seed in the Western Conference, which is 113 points. And so they are going to be the number one seed in the West. The Vancouver Canucks played their final game of the regular season tonight against Winnipeg. Vancouver has locked up the number 2 seed in the Western Conference playoff picture. They cannot catch Dallas, and they cannot be caught by Edmonton. Edmonton is second in the Pacific right now. They have 104 points. They are playing in Colorado tonight. Nothing on the line for either team. So again, the Oilers are going to be the number 2 seed in the Pacific. Nashville has 99 points. They will face Vancouver in the first round of the playoffs. Predators have ended their season. It is Nashville against Vancouver in the first round of the playoffs. So that leaves the 2 final teams with something on the line tonight. The Vegas Golden Knights with 98 points and the LA Kings with 97 points. The Vegas Golden Knights host the Ducks tonight in their regular season finale. The LA Kings host the Blackhawks tonight in their regular season finale. So what is on the line for the Kings tonight? If the Kings lose to the Blackhawks, they will be the 8th seed in the West and face the number 1 seed, the Dallas Stars, in the first round of the playoffs. If the Kings win and the Vegas Golden Knights lose to the Anaheim Ducks, the Kings will be the 3 seed or the number 3 team in the Pacific, and they will face the Edmonton Oilers in the first round. If the Kings win and Vegas loses in overtime or a shootout, LA would still be the number 3 seed because they would be tied in points with the Oilers at 99. The Kings have the tiebreaker with more regulation wins. So Vegas has to win in regulation if the Kings win tonight to hold on to that number 3 spot in the Pacific Division. If both teams were to lose in either regulation or a shootout or overtime, then Vegas gets the number 3 spot in the Pacific. They would face Edmonton, and the Kings would face the Stars. So I believe that's all the possible scenarios tonight for the LA Kings and who they would face. It's either going to be Vancouver or Edmonton. We know that. Again, for the key, if you think it's a better matchup like I do, you're rooting for the Kings to win tonight and for the Vegas Golden Knights to lose either in regulation or overtime. It doesn't matter. But the Kings have to win and Vegas has to lose in some manner. If the Kings lose, then it's us against the Canucks. If the Vegas Golden Knights and the Kings both win, then Vegas would play Edmonton and the Kings would play the Dallas Stars. So we will see how that goes. Quick Kings note to pass along. Congratulations to Ontario Reign forward Samuel Fagemo and defenseman Brant Clark. They were both named to the AHL's second team All-Star team today. I'm not sure how a guy who's second in the AHL in goals scored and a player who, despite playing about 20 less games than his competitors, is still one of the top scoring defensemen. I'm not sure how they don't make the first team All-Star in the AHL, but Admittedly, I don't follow the AHL closely like I do the NHL. So still, congratulations on fine seasons for Samuel Fagemo and Brant Clark in the AHL with the Ontario Reign. And real quick, the Kings did extend their affiliation agreement with the ECHL's Greenville Swamp Rabbits. You may not be too familiar with the Greenville Swamp Rabbits located in Greenville, South Carolina. By the way, awesome name and logo. They're basically, I guess if you're a baseball fan, they would equate to being the AA level of play, with the Ontario Reign being like AAA in the AHL. Most of the Kings' real prospects at the pro level are playing in Ontario. It is rare for an ECHL player to make it to the NHL, with the exception of goalies. Now, most teams like to have more than 2 goalies in their system at the pro level, but there's only room to play 2 in the AHL. So the ECHL provides a place for an extra goalie to play. That is, for example, where one player in the Kings organization that you might be familiar with is playing in the ECHL, and that is Jacob Ingham, who is a goalie. Now, in the AHL, you're likely going to have one goalie who's more of a prospect and another goalie who has some NHL experience, is more NHL ready to fill in if necessary. The prospect for the Ontario Reign and the Kings would be former Michigan star Eric Portillo, and the kind of NHL ready guy in case of emergency would be Aaron Dell. So that leaves you with another goalie who's more of a prospect. Where do you have him play? It's kind of what the ECHL is for, and that's where Jacob Ingham is as well. A famous former ECHL goalie for the LA Kings. How about Jonathan Quick? Yes, Jonathan Quick played in the ECHL for the LA Kings before getting his chance in the NHL, and of course, going on to a Hall of Fame career. By the way, the Greenville Swamp Rabbits are in the ECHL playoffs. They'll be taking on the Orlando Solar Bears. Their first game is April the 21st, and I will try and remember to keep track of what's going on with the Kings ECHL affiliate, the Greenville Swamp Rabbits. And again, the Kings have extended their agreement with that team to be their ECHL affiliate going forward. You might remember the ECHL did have the Long Beach Ice Dogs for a little while. Now, the Long Beach Ice Dogs played in a few different leagues, the IHL. I think they were in the West Coast Hockey League for a little while, but they ended their existence playing in the ECHL, which has been around since the late 80s. It's a nice little league. But again, Greenville Swamp Rabbits, Kings affiliate in the ECHL, which used to stand for East Coast Hockey League. But then when they expanded, it didn't really make sense anymore. They have teams in Utah and Idaho. That's as far west as they go now, with the Ice Dogs folding a few years ago. But anyway, they still wanted to keep the brand that people were familiar with, the ECHL, but it's actually not called the East Coast Hockey League anymore. They officially are just known as the ECHL. It doesn't stand for anything, it's a little weird, but hey, whatever. All right, that's going to do it for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day. Coming up on Friday, we will recap the regular season finale against the Blackhawks. We will talk about who the Kings are going to match up with in the first round of the playoffs, and we'll have another Kings fan feedback show. If you want to get in on that, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. It helps the algorithm, helps the show to be found by people across YouTube. We really appreciate that. We'd also love for you to stay interactive with us on social media. Follow us on X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings, go.